Hi, Anthony Parent here, and wow, we've had a change. We're going to talk about FBARs today, but wow, big news coming out of Belgium yesterday. And essentially it gets to this. The Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, which requires banks around the world to report all the bank account information on people it suspects of being Americans and then sending that over to the IRS. Wow, well, this is something incredible that has happened. John, you want to explain what happened here?
Well, I will attempt to explain.
You please let me. You know what? I have you. I have you hidden right now. Our people are. Let me just get this fixed here so people can see your beautiful face. There we go. All right, fantastic. All right, John. So what happened here? This seems kind of like good news. Is it good news?
It's good news. Let me do the best I can with this. Then I'm actually going to invite Jenny to perhaps fill in the gaps, although the intention is to paint with a fairly broad brush here. Okay, so in the beginning, there was FATCA,
Yes.
followed by the FATCA IGAs. Some years later, Europe enacted this GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which in a very general sense applies to sending information outside of Europe, sending personal information outside of Europe, perhaps more, but it certainly includes at least that. Now, obviously, things like FATCA and the CRS are for the precise purpose of sending the information of European citizens and residents outside of Europe. Or outside of Europe in some cases, okay. The CRS would include, country by country exchanges. Now, this is not something I know an awful lot about, so I'm just going to keep this extremely simple because if I go one step beyond simplicity, I'll probably mess it up. But the GDPR, the people who have the benefit of it, okay, include individuals who are European residents and citizens. Okay. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that there's a lot of people who are upset about FATCA. All right. Which is this, sort of harvesting information of anybody who's suspected of being a U.S. person and sending it to the United States. Now, I would emphasize that what this does, and I think this is very important here, is that it is a U.S. requirement to send information mostly from a country where the person actually does live, say France or Belgium, to a country where the person does not actually live, all right, which is the United States. So certainly there are other differences between FATCA and the CRS, but that is one of them. Now, there are people, including Jenny in her lawsuit. Okay, Jenny Webster is participating with us today. Thank you very much for that, Jenny. Who have challenged the general mechanics of FATCA on the basis that to do this violates the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. Now, leaving aside the reasons for that I'm sure we'll get into the discussion a bit today, the bottom line is that, so there was a complaint in Belgium to the tribunal, the authority, if you will, who's responsible for administering this particular piece of legislation, the GDPR, which ruled that to send the information, the FATCA information, and this is for the government, if you will, right? Because remember that the FATCA IGAs are intergovernmental agreements. The tax authorities would send the information to the finance people, the tax people, who would then send it to the United States. So as I understand the decision, it was that for the finance people to complete the loop, if you will, and send the information of U.S. persons to the Internal Revenue Service runs head on into the GDPR. Okay, the benefits of the GDPR. In other words, buddy, the gig is up. Stop it now. All right, for the the Belgian tax authorities to send the information to the IRS violates the GDPR. Now, that's essentially what has happened. I have not read the decision for two reasons. First of all, it's 79 pages, and secondly, it's in a language that I don't understand. So, I come at this without having read the decision at all, and my description is based on a summary from multiple sources. However, it is clear that this can be appealed, and I guarantee you it will be appealed. So this is just sort of one more step in the journey, if you will. I don't know if the decision is stayed on appeal or not, okay? But it will be appealed for sure. And I strongly suspect that everybody will be hostile to the decision, including the banks. I think everybody will be hostile to the decision, except for those who are the beneficiaries of the decision. Now, who are the beneficiaries? Well, the media talks about this as, they said that the information of accidental Americans can't be sent over. It's far broader than that. Okay, I mean, it seems fairly obvious that it's any European, any Belgian resident or citizen. Okay, whether they're an accidental American or not. All right, I would think, or without having read the decision. I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, that's what I.
Well, it's all Americans who are residing in Belgium.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's based on the broad beneficiaries of the GDPR are the residents and citizens. Okay. So certainly includes that at the very least. Okay. All American citizens residing in Belgium. I mean, I think that it would have to. So that is what has happened. Now, the question is, what does it mean? Is it good? Is it bad? Who are the winners? Who are the losers? At the moment, there are no winners and losers because there's a saying, the opera ain't over till the fat lady sings. And this is just sort of down the road. I mean, obviously, the initial news is very, very good. U.S. Treasury will be, I would have to think, unhappy with this. I would also have to think that the banks are probably going to be unhappy with this for this reason. Okay. Remember that the banks were the greatest supporters of the IGAs, the absolute greatest. Certainly in Canada, they lobbied hard for it. And the reason is that the effect of the FATCA IGA is not only to legalize the bank from giving the information about U.S. persons to a third-party source and to actually require it. Okay, but what it does is it exempts them from, it makes them fully compliant, with the laws of Belgium or Canada or something. So the problem is, I think that the banks are now caught between a rock and a hard place. All right, because basically, if they do not, okay, well, actually, it's not quite the banks. Okay, it's the country of Belgium, if you will, right? Because if Belgium does not turn this information over to the IRS, then the country is in breach of its obligations under the FATCA IGA.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So the country would be in breach of its obligations if they turn it over. And if they don't turn it over, if they don't turn it over, the country's in breach of its obligations. And if they do turn it over, I mean, they're in breach of their obligations.
Yeah.
They're caught between a rock and a hard place. As I look at this, okay, I would pause and I would first of all say the following. That as usual, there's all discussion about FATCA. But the simple, FATCA of the matter is that this is all about citizenship taxation, right? I mean, citizenship taxation is the original sin. That's what's caused this, and that is what continues this. Now, what's the solution here? There is only one solution, and that is to ensure that there's no data to report. Okay, that's the only way that everybody can be not violating laws, right? To ensure that there's no data to report. How do you do that? You terminate the accounts of all U.S. citizens in Belgium, and you do it immediately. And I certainly would be looking to do that if I were involved in the Belgian financial system, whatever. Now, I understand the immediate response to that is, well, everybody has a right to a basic bank account in Europe. Okay, that's fine. And again, this is not something that I don't know a great deal about. Therefore, my thinking is not encumbered by too many details. But it seems to me that the answer to the question should be, well, if this is such a big problem, then the U.S. government should be setting up a special FATCA bank and trust with a direct connection to the IRS all over the world and require any U.S. citizen outside the United States to bank at that bank only. That's it. I mean, it's of course a horrible thing to do, but if they're really, really so intent on keeping this nonsense going, then something like that has to happen, because very, very clearly there is no possible way in this context that these non-U.S. banks can continue to have U.S. citizens as clients if they live in Europe. All right. Now, here's where I'm not 100% sure, and I had a discussion with Keith this morning, and I may be wrong on this, but my reading of this is that there's no problem for the European banks to have customers who are not European residents or citizens. All right. So they can keep that one going and perhaps report it. But, there's no way, it seems to me at this point, that these European banks can continue to have U.S. citizens who are resident in Europe as clients.
Yeah. And
so
I think
that's where we are.
Yeah.
And I just point before we continue, because this is so important. This is not about FATCA. It's about the U.S. insistence on defining European residents and tax residents as U.S. tax residents. And this has got to come to a head.
Yeah.
It cannot go on. It cannot. And, if this comes to deporting U.S. citizens, then that's what they need to do. Because there's no possible way that any country can, continue to live under the threats of the twin sanctions of FATCA and citizenship taxation. It's simply impossible.
Yeah.
Well, I want to introduce our guest. Introduce our guest, Jenny Webster in the UK. Jenny, thanks for joining us today, and appreciated that. And I have your website for your crowd, because you are crowdfunding your own case. So
yes.
So, but first, before we get to your case, what's your reaction to this news from Belgium?
Well, I really couldn't believe it when I saw it yesterday. I did not have any notice that it was coming. So I just almost fell over. I just was so shocked. And it just still seems like I want to keep pinching myself that it's actually happened, because this is what we've been waiting for, and what, my legal team has been writing letters about over and over again for years now. So to have this great result from the Association of Accidental Americans and their Belgian chapter, I mean, huge congratulations to them. Well done.
Amazing.
It's just it's a great ruling, and I have read some of it. I haven't gone all the way through it, but it's a beautiful ruling, what they've got from the Data Protection Authority on this. So when I woke up this morning, I really kind of felt different. I felt like, oh my goodness, I live in a world where our data protection rights are being upheld now in this context. It just felt different. I thought, can that even be real after all these years of that not happening? And so it's just been a great feeling, and I'm just so pleased. I'm delighted for the association and the claimant, the brave claimant who brought this about.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I think for myself, what I was amazed at was that what I read, it was something like this. It's like, hey, look, Belgium's okay data sharing. They're fine data sharing this information with the U.S. as long as the U.S. complies with GDPR. But what I read was that security protections that would be in the GDPR aren't with FATCA. And so I was like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah. And other protections, like being able to check the data, and is my microphone, sorry, is the sound coming through?
No,
okay?
You're good. You're good.
Okay, sorry. The right of reply, the right to have some kind of to have a process to go through to complain, or to have a way of checking or fixing it if your data is not being dealt with right, or if there's a problem, or all of those things are missing. And a person in Belgium doesn't have that with the US. They don't have any way of so GDPR sets out all those things. You have to be able to have rights with regard to your data. That are just not possible with the way that their FATCA IGA is according to the ruling. And the ruling talks a lot about the indiscriminate nature of FATCA. So it's blatantly automated, systematic. There's no targeting. There's no sort of purpose limitation down to people who are actually suspected of tax evasion. It's just automated bulk sending of this data, and that's why it's against the GDPR according to the ruling.
Yeah, I call it kind of a global stop and frisk, is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in other contexts, it would be obvious, but maybe with data protection being kind of a new thing, it doesn't seem immediate for people to realize how wrong that is. But when I got my letter from my bank in 2016, I sure knew there was something deeply, deeply, severely wrong with it. And yeah, so this is great after years of having this cause so many problems in my life. It's just a wonderful thing to see.
And keep in mind on this is not just done with Belgium. There are court cases on this exact thing in France, in the Netherlands, and in Luxembourg that need to be ruled on as well. So having this good news ruling in the immediate will help those cases.
Well, and I want to talk about Jenny's case. So Jenny, you have a case in the UK pending?
Yes, my case is before the court now, and the trials are at the end of November. It's the last week in November that it goes to the High Court. So I started my campaign in 2019. So I've been so lucky and had so much support from so many people, and had hundreds of pledges, and everyone's just been brilliantly, and the comments on the crowdfunding page as well are just so uplifting to me, and I really appreciate it.
I put that link in. I just want to interrupt. We one of our long-term viewers has a comment here. Suzanne has this comment. One of my favorite books growing up was The Mouse That Roared. I'm very happy my country, Belgium, has finally roared, but still dread what the response for our financial institutions will be with the U.S. And she also further comments, FATCA violated Belgian privacy laws before GDPR came into being, but it was the U.S. calling the shots in the deep economic crisis. Our U.S. financial institutions couldn't comply with U.S. FATCA without violating Belgian law, so the IGA was a workaround. The GDPR added a new layer to the problem. So, and I guess that is kind of I guess I'm just amazed by what's going on here. That because now there's some momentum, and there's some real momentum here going around. Now, do we have Keith? Do we have cases going around in other countries too?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, in France,
in
the Netherlands, and in Luxembourg.
Okay.
And if they fall, quote unquote, I think that's a good thing. It just puts more chinks in the armor.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And I think what this does, this really helps illuminate the fact that our data the IRS collects isn't necessarily, the processes really aren't that great. And the one thing that I always think of, and this is what I said in 2017, repealing FATCA, is remember in 2015 we had the OMB hack, the Office of Management and Bureau, whatever that the OMB
management and budget, is it OMB? Yeah.
And so it was something like 22 million U.S. persons had their data breached, and there's a settlement giving each one of them $10,000, but they had all their information, and it was assumed, and it is assumed, that China was the one who hacked it and got all the information, everything on these people. And the problem with FATCA is that you're creating a database. You're creating a database that can be hacked of all this information. And you're trying to figure out, well, what's the upside? What does the United States government get for risking the privacy of every American around the world? What's the big win? What's the compelling reason?
Well, according to the former IRS chief, Rettig, he said that you get a bigger haystack out in the yard. He said that FATCA data was a haystack, and there's no point in having a bigger haystack out in the yard. He's basically said that they can't do anything with it. They can't go through it. They can't match it up with anything. It's just sitting there, like you say, just a giant database just sitting there waiting, I guess, waiting to
be hacked, right?
be hacked or
Yep, whatever, right? It's an amazing. So maybe the focus, the focus can be turned to just sort of how unhelpful this is to everybody.
I have a question for Jenny, if I may. Jenny, do you think, I don't know if you had a chance to talk to your lawyers, but do you think that this ruling in Belgium will help your case significantly, a little bit, come November?
I definitely think it's a positive development for sure. I mean, my case is about my breach of my own privacy rights and data protection rights. And obviously there are some differences with it, with being in Belgium and not mine being in the UK, but definitely very, very, very positive development.
I want to take a look at, there was the little snippet that you had, Keith, and move on to answer this question. Does GDPR apply outside the EU?
And it does.
And it does. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, because, as John and I spoke this morning, if you have a homeland American, so an American living in the United States that has a bank account in Belgium, for example, that information can't be transferred to the US because it's within the EU. It's within Belgium. So that's a problem there in itself. And then Jenny added on the meat and potatoes of it, that certain systems need to be in place for for that to be even considered.
Right. Yeah.
Am I correct? I think,
like
am I correct in my understanding, Jenny?
Yeah. Like the right to be informed is another one that there's just, I mean, the Belgium ruling, I mean, you can just see it. It fails on point after point of all these things that need to be in place for people to have data protection rights that meet the GDPR standard.
Yeah, here's the press release out here. I'm pulling this up. The Belgian DPA prohibits the transfer of tax data of Belgian accidental Americans to the U.S. Again, not just accidental Americans. That does apply to accidental Americans, but it's really any American living in Belgium. It applies to them as well.
And as John said, and I believe he's right, any citizen living in Belgium for whatever reason,
right,
that information can't be transferred outside of Belgium.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is always something that bugged me about FATCA, is that the banks have to go through and report on people it suspects of being U.S. persons. They may not be. They may not be.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's been no penalties for them over reporting. I mean, like you say, you can't check. You can't check when your data's sent. How would you know? Maybe your data's been sent and you didn't know, but how would you know? They don't tell anyone.
Right. And the thing is that, just because you have a U.S. birthplace does not automatically make you a U.S. person. If you're the child of a diplomat, you're not a U.S. person. And
you would
be a few of those around.
Yeah, you raise a good point, Anthony, because if you're a child of a diplomat, you're not a U.S. person, and obviously you wouldn't even have a CLN, a certificate of loss of nationality, to renounce, and you wouldn't have, per se, a social security number.
Right. So, yes. And even though your birthplace could say New York City, that fact alone does not conclusively make you a U.S. person, even though there's birthright citizenship, because there is that exemption for the children of diplomats. And so that's something that always bugged me about FATCA. Is like you're assuming people are citizens and you're reporting this information to a database for cases where there's no reason to report it, that people aren't U.S. citizens. And so even under the crazy citizenship-based taxation, you have to be a citizen or a U.S. person first, of which they're not. And that's why with this bulk, data collection going to some sort of database that isn't secure, isn't organized, that's just a liability for everyone around the world.
Yeah.
And again,
And the
yeah,
fact that it happens yearly, it was saying in the Belgian judgment, the fact that it happens every year, like clockwork at the same time, that's another factor that shows this is blatant, bulk, systematic, automated data collection. That's, that's just
wow.
breaks GDPR.
So oh, okay. Oh,
It
wow.
has to have
So
a purpose, and the purpose has to be related to the data collection. So it can't be, in the Belgian ruling, it's saying that you can't just use a broad brush thing like we want to support tax compliance or something, so we're going to do this. It has to be a lot more targeted than that. There has to be connections between the purpose and the data collection activities that are going on.
So I mean, we've just sort of proven that well, look, no, they're under their own guidelines of who they have to report. There's not even there's not necessarily a connection between the criteria they're using to report and anything.
What the purpose should be. I mean,
Yeah,
the
right.
purpose is about tax evasion, but there's no indicator whatsoever that any of these people are guilty of tax evasion.
Right.
The only thing they have is a bank account where they live.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Prior to this bulk collection, did they go through to say, oh, wait a second, we have all these people who are in compliance with the code. Let's get the people who aren't there. They didn't even do that. They're just like, yeah, just everybody. Just everybody.
Yeah.
So people have been doing the right thing. People with a foreign income exclusion owe nothing and been paying nothing. So they've done nothing to determine whether or not there's any connection. So it's just sort of like not a money grab, but a data grab. That's what it is.
Yeah.
A blind, stupid, massive data grab.
Yeah.
It's like
I think
recording
that-
everyone's face who's out on the street, who walks down a certain street, just recording their
Right.
face. And
Well, they were
their
here, right,
name
yeah,
and
yeah.
saving it in a database or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But listen,
Like-
this is all true. This is all true, but it also doesn't matter, right? In the real context that we're talking about, the issue is not, is this thing over inclusive? I mean, obviously, it violates the GDPR, no question about that. Okay, we're just talking about the multiple ways that it does. Show me the ways, but that's not the issue here. The issue is that we have an agreement that's been signed between Belgium and the United States. We have the extraterritorial legislation in the Internal Revenue Code. So the real issue is to what extent is Belgium going to allow its sovereignty to be violated by the United States? That's the real issue here. Okay, I mean, there's no question that FATCA is evil. There is no question that it violates all these tenets, all these parts of the GDPR. The issue now is how is this going to unfold in a context where Belgium and other countries have agreed to this bulk data, all these horrible things. They have agreed to this. The United States has insisted on it because it replicates Chapter 4 of the Internal Revenue Code. So what happens next? Okay, that's the real issue.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd be interested in everybody's thoughts on that.
Well, as I said this morning, I think it's going to be interesting what the Belgian banking authority that oversees the banks in Belgium, what they state. What are they going to do? I mean, that's the umbrella organization like the Banque de France in France that oversees all the banks in France. So the equivalent in Belgium, what are they going to do? What are they going to say to their banks?
Why is that the issue, Keith? I mean, that sort of assumes, that that the response of Belgium should be to deal with, sort of the U.S. A declaration that this is the way it's going to be. I mean, I think the real question here is, the real question is it reasonable to assume that the U.S. will respond to this in a responsible way that, assumes correctly that Belgium and the rest of the world has this kind of sovereignty, right? Because otherwise, if they're just going to continue this blind, idiotic insistence that they're going to impose the sanction of citizenship taxation on the rest of the world, and that by God, the rest of the world is going to help them impose this sanction on them through these FATCA IGAs, then what is Belgium to do? What are these other countries to do? That's the real question here.
Yeah, it is a question. That's why I was saying that with the Belgian tax authorities, what are they going to say? Well, are they going to say we have to adhere to this ruling, or we still have to adhere to FATCA? What are they going to say? That's the
Well, I
big
think
question mark.
they would be in, I would imagine, in contempt
I'm
of the
sorry, the
ruling.
Belgian banking
If they sent
authorities.
the data, regardless of the ruling, they'd be in contempt of court, I would have thought.
Yeah, and I would imagine that there would probably be damages by people would be able to file suits now, like where you violated this. So I'd imagine there's going to be a way that individuals could have a claim against the bank.
So the question is, will sovereign countries of the world, including Belgium, say to the United States, "Sorry, buddy, no can do. This violates our laws"?
Yeah.
My and I would say this, that if a foreign bank does not comply with FATCA, the sanction is a 30%
Exactly.
tariff on any inbound U.S. wires.
Confiscation. Use the right word.
Thank you.
But have
Confiscation.
they? I think there haven't been any cases where they've ever done that, even when countries haven't completely,
Well, they
done
keep
what-
on delaying it, Jenny. As you know, they keep on
No, they
delaying
haven't
it.
done it because
Yeah,
the
yeah.
provisions of the FATCA IGA is there are very specific rules for how the IRS has to give notice, timeframes, etc. Okay, so it's really that the effect of the FATCA IGA is to impose a predictable, visible procedure before that can be done. But look, the IGAs are just a way of implementing the same thing. We are back to the same question. Will these countries stand up to the United States, say we are sovereign countries, and I am sorry, but when it comes to what goes on in our countries, our laws trump yours, regardless of what your laws are? That is the question. Are they going to say that or not? Because if they don't,
Yeah.
going back to my original point, if they are going to allow the United States to impose its law, its legislative will on other countries, there's only two options, and that is to not allow Americans to have bank accounts or deport the Americans. That's it. Because the reality is, at the end of the day, this simply cannot continue.
And
No.
John, I agree. If Belgium is alone, my guess is that they'd be a way. They would find a way to reimpose FATCA. However,
Yeah. My
if
gut is telling me they're not going to be.
there was something called let me use my air quotes, a European Union that united against this, and essentially I would say if the European Union got together, it's like, you know what, we're going to go with the GDPR and you go pound sand with your FATCA, that would be enough for the back off.
Right, and I think that's something.
But alone,
I think that. Oh, sorry, Anthony. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just say alone, I think Belgium the pressure would be too much and they would eventually fold. But united, I think GDPR would be upheld in these countries, and that the IRS would be out of luck on FATCA.
Yeah. All right, next question. Is there a way?
Let me finish. I'm sorry, John. Let me interrupt for a second on the heels of what Anthony was saying. Is that, if Belgium is alone, certainly they could be alone. But when I was wearing my other hat in the pharmaceutical industry, there was the European Medicinal Agency, okay? And with pharmaceutical companies, what they have done, instead of getting things approved by the EMA, they would take a country like Belgium or France, get it approved there first. And once that approval is done there first, all the other countries follow suit. And that is historically has been the case. So if I apply that, which I know for certain, to what's happening now, other countries very well could be following suit.
Yes, I agree.
Well, that's
anyway.
So it just takes that first country to stick its neck out, and
and Belgium did, So
So anyway, John, sorry, you were going to say something.
Go ahead. Go ahead, John.
So look, here's what has to happen. Okay, and I'm very serious about this. What has to happen is, so don't forget, all right, all of this decision, although, by the way, I think this is really great stuff, okay, what happened, to be clear, I think it's great stuff, but the effect of it is simply, to really move Belgium back to the situation it was before the IGA was signed, namely to comply with its U.S. laws to violate Belgium's law, right? That's really
Right. Yeah.
it just brings us back. So I don't know, whether we're further ahead or not. But the whole point of this is now, again, what's fascinating about this decision, if I'm understanding it correctly, and I can't say for sure that I am, but I think I am, is that what it really applies to Belgian residents, right? European residents. Seems to me it does leave open the possibility for a U.S. resident to go to that high tax jurisdiction of Belgium, to evade U.S. taxes, et cetera. In other words, I think a U.S. resident might be able to have an account there. But the whole point here is that what this does do, and this is very, very helpful, is it illuminates that citizenship taxation is the problem. And what citizenship taxation really is the U.S. coming into other countries and claiming the tax residents of other countries as U.S. tax residents. It's a form of invasion, okay, is what's happening. So what has to happen here is that Belgium has to say the following, okay? It has to say, this is all well and good about this FATCA stuff, but the real root of the problem is, you're coming over here and you're claiming people live in our country, our taxpayers, our tax residents. You're making the absolutely outrageous, preposterous claim that somehow these are your tax residents. And let's forget this FATCA nonsense, which is just eliminate the problem. The time is to take a firm stand that you can define your tax residency any way you want in this world. But we are not going to go along with your coming over here and claiming our tax residents to be somehow your tax residents. Those days are over.
Yeah.
And if you do not agree to that, the consequence is that we can no longer have U.S. citizens in this country because they cause these regulatory problems. They're not able to save for retirement, et cetera, if they comply with your laws. And we're just not willing to put up with this anymore. And this is what needs to be happening.
Yeah.
And make the larger point that how much your U.S. citizenship drags you down around the world.
Exactly.
Lost. That's really how bad it is. How awful it is to be an American. We truly have one of the worst passport to
Anthony, it's just as bad for governments to have Americans living in their countries.
Yeah.
It's nothing but base erosion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Use it. American citizens living in the United States are, the modern day equivalent of Trojan horse soldiers that simply enter countries, and then all of a sudden, they wake up and they find these are just being used to siphon money, data, everything outside the country to the United States.
Yeah.
FATCA and citizenship taxation are 24/7 sanctions, not against targeted individuals, not against targeted countries, but in every country and human being outside the United States.
Right. Again, and so untargeted that it also targets people who aren't Americans.
Yeah.
That's how untargeted it is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And
Go ahead,
I
Jenny.
was thinking about it. I mean, the oh my God moment that people call it, when you find out about all this stuff it's so unique in terms of, people go through all kinds of unfortunate circumstances and tragedies that befall them, but it's very unique because it's the one thing that no one understands.
Right.
No one will be able to give you any comfort over it, or even or they don't even comprehend it. And it's something that you would never even think that it would ever happen. It's like if you get, if you were in an accident, or unfortunately you get ill, something like that, or a family member's ill, those are kinds of things that are really awful, but they happen, and you kind of know in the back of your mind that could happen. This kind of thing is so completely incomprehensible. You could never see it happening. You would never be prepared for it. You'd even know that it could happen. It doesn't make sense in the mind of any normal person, and you're completely alone with it. There's no understanding from anyone until, you reach out to, people like Keith and, all the people that I found online. But before that, it just destroys you. It's like the mental torture, and it doesn't make any sense.
The
I've dealt
U.S.
with many people who have been mentally destroyed by
Yeah,
this.
mental torture is a good way to put it, and that's why we say,
Yeah.
you know what, it's called financial terrorism,
Yeah.
or otherwise known as terrorism.
Right.
That's what it is.
Absolutely.
There's no
I
reason for it. You're only doing it because you don't even know why you're doing it.
yeah.
You don't even know, they don't even know why. You know, again, back at the 2017 FATCA hearing,
Yeah.
they had no idea what the law actually was, and we were trying to explain
Yeah.
it to them.
Actually,
Um,
It's only
I have
people
another
who've
thought
been
here.
in
you don't
it,
know
have
what it
been
is.
through it,
You
who
don't need it then, do you? Right?
Yeah.
They were so vastly
Yeah.
confused. We got a few
Here's
more comments from Suzanne. I just want to get to,
Yeah.
and this is sort of the same thing. She goes like, our bank sent a notice they were going to shut my eldest's account due to U.S. place of birth. She had a CLN on fire, and we had to provide it again to save her account. Every year, we have to provide my CLN to the bank to prove I was no longer a U.S. person. But they did send data to FPS. This is amazing. And then she finally comments, if our financial institutions end up being pressured by the U.S., it's possible that they will just refuse. Suspected. And exactly. It's not just U.S. persons, but suspected U.S. persons.
U.S. persons. Right. Exactly.
Anybody on this call, can you give me one rational reason why
Yeah.
a bank in Belgium would not just turf every U.S. citizen out?
You raise a good point. I mean, a viable one. I
Yeah.
I mean, that is a logical thing that a bank can do in Belgium based on this.
I think that's
I mean, they have. I don't see the way around it, John. You're right. I
Right.
don't
have
see
But I think, like I said, if France falls, the Netherlands falls,
let's say
Luxembourg falls,
rises. If France rises.
rises. Exactly. I hate to use that
grows a
term.
spine.
Right. Exactly. That may make a big, big difference. And
Yeah.
John, there's something that you said that I wanted to just get clarification on, whether it be from you or from Jenny, because you read some of it. Is the ruling stated that it violated Belgian privacy law, or did it state that it violated the GDPR? Because that's a big difference. Because if it states that it violated European law, that's a good thing. That helps these other countries. You see what I mean? Because if it's
Yeah,
only
it's
Belgian privacy law,
mostly about that it violates GDPR. There's several other laws mentioned,
That's
which
great.
I don't know about very well, but the GDPR is the main instrument that it talks about.
and that's all of the
Yeah.
European Union.
Yeah, exactly. So it will give information to all of them they can use.
the other way out of this, the only other way that I can see to save both the integrity of the GDPR and U.S. citizenship taxation, as absurd as this sounds, would be for the U.S. government to set up its own banks worldwide,
Right.
called FATCA Bank and Trust, require any American citizen to use that bank and that bank only. It has a direct link to the IRS, so there's no transfer of information. I mean, I know it sounds crazy and absurd, but that's the only way to do that. Because, I thought you were going to say, Keith, well, in Europe, I understand everybody's entitled to a basic bank account.
That is true. Yeah.
But does that mean, that it has to be a bank account, offered by any certain kind of bank? So why not just create FATCA Bank and Trust? The slogan can be, in citizenship taxation, we trust. And
Yeah.
then what Congress can do, I can just imagine this coming from the Democrats for sure. All right, they can say, well, any American citizen who leaves the United States, if you're going to have a bank account, is required to have an account at and only at FATCA Bank and Trust. No uses of foreign accounts. And then just think, you wouldn't need a comprehensive FBAR. There'd just be a simple question. Do you or have you ever had a foreign bank account? People would check no. That would be it. But I know that sounds absurd, and I'm trying to make it sound absurd. But the problem is that that's the only way this stuff can be saved, is with this kind of nonsense. So it's time to move this discussion away from FATCA, which is nothing but a symptom of the absolute stupidity and insanity of the U.S. running around the world claiming the residents of other countries, although they're U.S. tax residents, and the governments of these other countries stupidly not understanding what's going on, and therefore signing these treaties with a saving clause where they effectively get this. So every country that has a tax treaty with the U.S. has agreed, this is unbelievable, that the United States has the right to claim any resident of our country as a U.S. tax resident, and therefore most of this treaty doesn't apply to them, okay? Or they don't get the benefits of it. That's what's going on here.
I think one thing interesting in the ruling was that I think the tax authority was relying on the fact that FATCA was older than GDPR and thinking that, oh, well, because, when we signed up to FATCA, GDPR didn't exist yet, that we can do this and we can do that. But because it's been so long now, it's been 5 years since GDPR, the so-called, they call it a standstill period. The standstill period is kind of over. You can't just forever say, okay, well, we have two different regimes, the pre GDPR and the post GDPR and two different standards. You can't do that. You have to make everything meet the new standard. That's the law. So they have to meet GDPR now. So they can't use the time period.
Then everything I'm describing is completely accurate. The only way to solve this, all right, so that everybody can claim victory, is for no bank to have a U.S. citizen as a customer. Therefore, there's no data to transfer. Okay, so there can be no a sort of breach of that, or the U.S. to step right on and say, well, our citizens are special and they should have special banks. So, we're going to create FATCA bank and trust, so anybody who leaves the United States has to use. I mean, this is how stupid this stuff is. All roads lead to a demand that the U.S. in the practice of capturing the citizens and residents of other countries and claiming that they are U.S. tax residents. That's what has to happen.
Absolutely. Well, this is something we're going to be monitoring for updates. This is an incredible story. I think, I think it's a positive story because it's showing something at least in the right direction, and it's showing the conflict, the massive conflict that can only be resolved in a couple of ways. Neither way is really good, and is in violation of other things. So this is going to be an interesting development here.
Let's be clear on what the conflict is. The conflict is over whether the U.S. gets to run the financial system of sovereign countries or not. That's the conflict.
Right. Yeah. Is the IRS in charge of the world, or
exactly,
or other countries in charge of themselves? And that's what they need to decide. We saw, I was baffled I think we were all baffled when, this law was passed. I'm like, well, these countries can just ignore it. But man, they fell over themselves. They fell over themselves.
Understand what this disaster taxation meant.
Well, they had, it's a 30% withholding penalty, and the dollar being the primary currency. That's why.
Yeah, the dollar is the reserve currency, and
reserve currency. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, that might be changing, and so we'll see what happens.
Well, there's another thing these countries could do, and that would be, I think we've talked about this before. What's interesting is that although a U.S. citizen in, say, France is required to report their French income to the IRS and pay tax on it, a U.S. citizen in, say, Puerto Rico or another territory is not. So maybe the solution should be that, Belgium can just offer to become a U.S. territory.
There we go. I guess that's right. And if they don't stand up, they are.
Ridiculous nonsense. It has to come to an end. And rather than allow this discussion to continue as some information exchange issue, which it actually is not, okay? This is about the U.S. trying to claim the residents of other countries as U.S. tax residents. Make that the issue. In that, then all these other problems end as well.
What you said, John, we have extraterritorial taxation. Well, what's the implication of when we say extraterritorial taxation? Well, you're saying those territories are ours.
Exactly.
So that's really every country in the world has decided to become and has agreed to become a territory of the United States of America
without the benefits of being a legal territory. That's the point. They're getting the worst of it.
It reminds me of getting a four-door Stratus, something like that. It reminds me of a story about getting a Dodge four-door Stratus. Like, get the whole four doors, not the two-door. The two-door Stratus won't do too much for you. Just get the four-door. That's
exactly. But what's interesting is we go back to 2017. You remember how, the scuttlebutt was, wow, the U.S. is going to move to territorial taxation for corporations. Then the TCJA is passed, and it turned out that they introduced GILTI. So really what happened was when the U.S. claimed It was moving to territorial
Well,
tax.
what we meant was
What they really were doing was saying, we're going to expand the territory over which we're exercising U.S. tax
that's
jurisdiction.
what guilty did, and that is what guilty did.
That's exactly
is
what it did. That's
exactly
what
what it
territorial means. We're
Yeah.
expanding it.
Right. Well, we're going to address this. Yeah, we're going to address this problem.
So maybe citizenship taxation is a form of guilty.
Oh, I know, right? They love. Yeah, that guilty. By the way, for those joining, it stands for Global Intangible Low Tax
Income.
something income. Yeah. So it's just a terrible acronym. They really
It's awful.
go for backwards to make that into something. So
It wasn't enough to call us fat cats. They had to call us guilty
Oh.
fat cats.
guilty fat cats, right? I mean, it's
They
so
didn't even know the
They-
guilty would apply to individuals. They weren't even thinking that far.
they don't know. They don't even know what they say.
They're
They have no
they're certifiably insane. Okay, I mean, but seriously, okay, this is an opportunity to turn the discussion to what it's really about. Okay, which is not so much information exchange. You can fix the information exchange and still have the citizenship taxation. No problem. Okay. And it's the citizenship taxation that has to go. And that's
Yeah.
what can be used to leverage for.
Right. Well,
Right here.
I mean, you're right, and that this is going to, these rulings may keep on going in the favor of Americans living in these European countries. Don't you think, John, that will at least put some more chinks in the armor of citizenship-based
What
taxation?
it's going to do is get them interested in same country exemption or exception or whatever.
Mm,
That's what it's going to do.
Yeah, there's way too many problems with that. Right. The solution that isn't. Yep. Well, anyway, we're about out of time. I just want to get the final words from each of our guests. John, let's start with you, and let me get your email up here for people who want to contact you. Your email is up there, citizenshipsolutions@protonmail.com. Anyone wanting to contact John Richardson. John, what's your final words on this topic?
I think that this decision is obviously a good decision, but this has nothing to do without, to repeat, nothing to do with FATCA and what it had. That's just the language that's being used to talk about the problems caused by what the U.S. might call citizenship taxation, but it really is entering other countries in a hostile way to capture the residents of those countries as U.S. tax residents. That's the issue. That's what needs to be discussed, and that's what needs to be brought to an end now.
Right on. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Keith, to you, and here's your email, US_overseas_advocate outlook.com. Keith, your final words on this.
yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. I don't have final words because it's too soon. We got to see how things are going to play out. But I do agree with John. I think the only difference we may have is for me, as I've said before, I look forward to more of these rulings. That doesn't mean to not focus on getting rid of citizenship-based taxation. It's got to have a focus there. But with these rulings putting more chinks in the armor, I think it'll only be a good thing.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
All right. Well, we're going to finish up with our very special guest, Jenny Webster,
Jenny,
and with a link to her crowd justice case. Jenny, your final words on this.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, I agree. It's a brilliant outcome for the group in Belgium and the Accidental Americans Association, and I think it's brilliant that the citizens' rights are being recognized in this, and my case is about the violation of my data protection and privacy rights, and it just gives me a really good feeling that these are being put in the forefront now. And thank you to everyone who's pledged to my crowdfunding, my legal challenge. The link is there that Anthony's kindly put up, and you can see links there to the correspondence that my legal team has published online in the public interest as well. And if you pledge, you'll get emails. You can leave a comment on the page as well. So thank you so much.
Anthony, I have one final thought I just wanted to share real quick.
Yeah.
Is that what we have seen with the Association of Accidental Americans, and what they've done is they have united they have united with a united principle. They've all been working very hard on this. This is what we need for Americans around the world to come together and unite under one principle of getting rid of citizenship-based taxation, because we're getting a good example of progress that can happen if you unite. And
Where
that's
did
what
we
needs
hear
to be
that
done.
before? Right on, exactly. Right. If we unite in our goals, and Belgium had. So I want to just and this is what my final words would be. Congratulations to Belgium, and really congratulations to the legal team who thought of this argument and got it through. And that was some incredible work. And Jenny, I just wish you the best fortune in the UK and all these other cases. I think we're on the right track. And these decisions demonstrate the complete absurdity of any country agreeing to allow the IRS to expand its tax base to its own country. So
Yeah.
if you're in charge of your own country, you got to take, because the IRS will take it. They'll take it. You got to stand up. You got to have a
Yeah.
backbone. You got to be a country, because without this, you're really, again, you're just sort of an extra territory of the United States without the protections of being a territory of the United States. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining, and we're going to keep on top of this, and we're going to follow up. And Jenny, we're going to follow up on your case as it goes up too. So we are looking
Thank
forward to
you.
that. So for John Richardson, and for Jenny Webster in the UK, and for Keith Fredman, this is Anthony Parent of Iris Medic. I thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so that you know when we're going live next. Thanks again.
Thank you.